Hi everyone, this is Josh J, Vintage Minis for Honda Mini Bikes in Orlando, Florida. This is video 3 on this build series of a Z50. This is 1978 Z50 that we are going to do Army themed build on. So this is the step in the series of builds that I'm going to start putting everything together. First thing I'm going to do is on my workbench here is we got my powder guy's really good about knowing how to assemble bikes and stuff. He's a mechanical guy, but he did on this one unfortunately put some powder on my steering stem. So these are bearings that were provided to me by the owner of the project. It's got these are cage bearings. You can get, a stock setup was a loose bearing setup with races, loose ball bearings. This is like the next easy step would be these cage bearings, where the ball bearings are all contained within this steel cage. And then also there's another version that I use, taper bearings, which a couple brands make. One of the well-known brands is All Balls taper bearing kits. But I'm going to use this kit. What I'm going to run into on this one is here on the steering stem. This is where one of the bearings or the races is going to go, the lower or upper race, and then the lower race down here needs a seat, but we got to build up. So I'm going to end up taking like a 3M Scotch-Brite on the Dremel, and I'll take this all back down to metal or enough to get me clearance to be able to slide my races back down onto that steering stem. Just when you guys, if you have to do any of this stuff, just take a few minutes and put some tape on anything painted or powder coated just to help protect your surface. So these are some off-brand Scotch-Brites packages of 3 different grit levels, Dremel tool. Just went around, cleaned off all the powder coat off. Did the same up here, but this race is fine. This will go on. But this actual race here, the smaller one that goes on the top, is still too small. So instead of trash canning this kit, I'm gonna end up taking this race. Same thing with the Dremel tool. I'm gonna put a sanding wheel on it, and then I'm gonna go around in the interior of it and open it up just a little bit and keep test fitting until it has a nice fit, and then we'll still use the kit. Alright, so literally like maybe a minute at the most with that wheel. So we'll get it on there. It's still snug, but I think there you go. So it's nice and snug, and didn't overdo it, so problem solved. So that's like the first area that you might want to address with your painter or powder coater guy. Just make sure they don't put any material on these surfaces. The other thing that's on this bike too is the shaft for the brake pedal. That's been coated too, and I know that this is probably going to have a clearance issue. So either my option is to come back in here and open this up a little bit, but it's going to be easier to just go and grind that paint down on that surface. So make sure to put a lot of grease in this area when you do assemble it, just to prevent it from seizing on you over. So let's jump on the bearing. Let's get the races in. Pre-chill your races in the freezer for 30 minutes at least, get them shrunken. Get a little WD-40 or some sort of lubricant. This is a 1 1/4 inch socket that I'm going to use to press the race into. So these are nice and chilled. I'm going to put a little WD-40, help ease it in. Muzzle. Alright, so those are in all the way, top and bottom. Alright, so working on getting some of these pipe. This is stuff that I didn't have go to powder, but now I have it. So we're going to do some satin black paint on it. Just trying to get everything blacked out from everything that's visible. All the tips of the axles and bolts. Alright, it's a good way to paint these. You put them on a piece of wood and then you can roll them back and forth and make sure you're getting all sides painted. The Honda, factory Honda bucket that's shiny black is now getting a satin black on it too. You got the axle spacers, a visible part of the race that I'm gonna have. That's no bearings are riding on that surface. That's the underside of the race. Spacer, some chain tensioner pieces, satin black, and I'm doing all the washers and lock nuts and washers. They're all on a wire that you can hang the bolts and get from all different angles on them. Just take some maybe a hanger wire, and I just have it raised up on a box, so it's an easy way to keep those painted and off the surface. So I'm going to go back and use a satin black paint on these, do the outer edges of the spline that's part of the gear, or part of the brake hub. I didn't want to powder these because you can get some buildup in this area on the splines, and it's just a pain in the butt to get cleaned up and make them fit back on here. So we're going to do a satin black paint, get those cleaned up. I'm going through kind of my bags of nuts and bolts that I think I'm going to be using on this, and I will do a satin black on all those. A lot of parts are painted now black. They're going to just letting them dry before I start assembling some other things, but I was going to look at putting the front forks together, but I noticed, if you can see in this video, height difference on these upper mount springs. So the bottom perch on this one is just something going on. I'm going to pull it apart. These springs are all taut and brought together, or the front fork, and then I'm going to put the shock together. I'll show you real quick. These don't have a lot of spring tension on them, so I don't use any kind of special tool to compress it. I can just do it by hand, and I'll show you how I do that to get everything compressed, and then the top part of the shock screwed back on tightly. Alright, so we'll just put it together, and like I said, you don't need any special tool. At least I don't, just compressing the spring. So take your top mount off, disassemble this. If you're looking at the spring, your tight coil winding, and then your wide gap goes down on the spring, and then the tight is up top. And you're just going to want to get your threads pulled up. Maybe just set it at a horizontal level so it doesn't fall back down on you. And then if you have these go back up on the top, at the top of the spring. So get your thread part sticking out from the top. That's all you need is just to start it, and then just get your started on the thread process. Just put a little cushion so I don't mess up the finish. Just put a little spring pressure down. Pull up at the same time, and you can get this to rotate. I think the key is probably cleaning your threads out so that both the top part of the shock and the threaded portion of your shock can screw on without any resistance, because that part will tend to want to spin, and that's why you would need to compress this down and put like a vice grip or something on it. But if the threads are really clean on both parts, it's gonna just spin all the way without any resistance, or it's gonna thread on all the way without any resistance, and then your shock part won't spin and cause a problem. So just compress that down and pull up at the same time and keep spinning. So just trying to zoom in on there. I don't know if you can see that metal part. Anyways, the metal, if you can't see it, it's pulled all the way to the top and it's locked on here. No special tool required. So that's it. Pretty easy. I got my little ninja over here watching me do the work. Yeah. So there you go. Both shocks are reassembled. And we'll just put some bushings in, the rubber, and then the metal sleeves. Before I go on with any assembly on the frame, I'm going to get the new tag on, the VIN tag. So we'll go ahead and get that on, and then I'm going to work on putting the front end onto here with the bearings. Alright, looking good with the new tag on. Alright, so I'm going to get the triple tree fork installed, and I'll put the rear swing arm on, put the rear shocks. So we'll do it. First thing we'll do is get some grease. Just put some grease in these bearings, or races. And I'll get that triple tree put in. Alright, so we got the triple tree yokes inserted. Now we're working from the top of the bike, put some more grease up here on this race. And I'll hand tighten this cap. You don't want to torque this down too much, just enough to push the bearings down into the race, but it's not something that needs to be really tight. You want to remove any of the slop in the yoke, make sure everything's snug, but kind of gentle torque down on this. Alright, so we got the swing arm on. Bring your bolt in on, bring the bolt in through the brake side, brake pedal side, which is on your right side. Same thing with your shock bolt. Bring it in from the right side. Make sure you put some grease on all these bolts, all the shanks of the bolts. Okay. Reason I like these soft tails. I always like the 70s soft tails, but the Z50R later frames, you know, this is a through bolt design on these frames. So you got these sections here that are welded on, and then you have a through hole, which your main stud bolt comes through, and then you put your other shock on. I just find that these are way more resilient, less prone to even bending, because you got all this extra structural support inside, as opposed to the later Z50Rs, which are just studs with threads on them. So those all get tweaked up and bent. Not the case on these frames. I took apart the upper portion of the front fork leg that had the bound on coil spring. I had to cut it. The spring was no good and it wouldn't release itself, plus this casting is compromised, so I'm gonna have to find another one of these legs. I'm gonna put a message out on the forums and see if someone will help me out. Until then, that front fork is on hold. Alright, so without reviewing all my old videos from a week ago, I think this is where I left off. I had to get a new spring set up here for the fork, so I got that in, and I'm just going to go ahead and get these put together with the roll pins. With these are going to be reused. If they were out of spec, they're no longer, because I do have some millage that's been built up from the powder coat on the fork leg, and with that happening, it's kind of spreading this. I've already test fit it, and it's a really nice tight fit in the fork tube. So I'll just go ahead and get this all assembled. I'll put a link down in my summary area in the video. I've already shown you guys, I have a video where it shows you how to take these apart and rebuild these kind of Springer fork legs, so I'll save you the time on this video. Alright, the fork legs are assembled and inserted into the tube. I'm going to get the top mount on and the bolts. I'm going to make these little washers. They're going to go right here and fit over this nub. So I'm just going to notch this hardware. Otherwise, this is not in the same height as this part here. And if you don't put a spacer of some sort, it's not going to be a good assembly there. Alright, simple enough, just notch them so they can clear those little nubs if you still have them on your forks. I've seen these on eBay, someone's making them for 30 bucks, so there's your solution there for 25 cents. Alright, so now we can put our top plate on, and it will be nice and level across from here to here, and put our two bolts here, and our nut and washer. Okay. Alright, so when you get your bike sitting like this, the next step I suggest is put your fenders on. You want to get your rear fender on, your front fender. So get your grommets and your hardware if you have that, and just let's get our fenders on. Alright, so I still got the hubs on the floor here. It's just getting late, and I'm gonna wrap it up for this evening. And then of course we got to get to the engine. I got to get the stock engine built, but I was able to get some parts on here, make it more look like a bike. You can see kind of how it's going to look. Still waiting for the decals to show up, but you know, everything as far as bolts go, everything's been blacked out. If you see it, it's blacked out. Oops. And then let's see what else. Yep, we did the chrome ring, did that in the green. So, alright guys, well that's going to be it for this video. Please subscribe, put some comments down on the bottom, and I'll get the next one up as soon as I get some more progress on this build. Thanks for following.